You know, some actors just play a character, but then you have the ones who build them from the ground up, piece by piece, until they become these unforgettable icons. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and really look at the creative process of one of the absolute greats, Samuel L. Jackson. We're going to see how his most legendary roles were actually made, not just performed.
Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to break this down into 4 key parts. First, we'll look at how he builds that foundation with his directors. Then, we'll see how he injects his own unique vision into a role. After that, we'll uncover some of the genius behind his improvisation. And finally, we'll talk about why these characters stick with us for so long.
Man, we all know the lines, right? We can quote them in our sleep, but the story of how those lines and the characters who say them actually come to be, well, that's even more fascinating. And for him, it all starts with the incredible power of collaboration.
Yeah, see, great characters are never ever created in a vacuum. They start with a conversation, a shared vision, and a deep level of trust between an actor and a director. This is pretty much the bedrock of Samuel L. Jackson's entire process.
I mean, his partnership with Quentin Tarantino, it's the stuff of legend. It all started when Jackson auditioned for Reservoir Dogs and didn't even get the part. But Tarantino remembered him, told him, hey, I'm writing something for you, and just 2 weeks later, the script for Pulp Fiction showed up. Their trust is so deep that during rehearsals for The Hateful Eight, Tarantino just asked Jackson to write the crucial Lincoln letter himself, and he did, right then and there. That's not just acting, that's co-creating.
And you know, sometimes landing an iconic role isn't about some grand audition process at all. He became Mace Windu, for example, pretty much because he just mentioned on a UK chat show that he'd love to be in a Star Wars movie. Just threw it out there. Seriously, that's what he told George Lucas. He just wanted to be in that world, even as a background extra in a white helmet. Thankfully, Lucas had something a little more significant in mind for him. And just like that, one of the most powerful Jedi in the entire galaxy was born from a simple public request. How cool is that?
But look, getting the part is really just the beginning. Jackson is famous for taking what's on the page and actively shaping a character's identity. He fights for the little details that make them feel real, and sometimes he's fighting for the very soul of the movie itself.
Okay, let's take Ordell in Jackie Brown. That unforgettable hair. That wasn't some costume designer's brilliant idea. No, it came directly from Jackson's vision for who this guy was. A dude who sometimes gets a little negligent with his perm, you know? Leaves it all messed up around the edges.
This is a great story. He actually had the wig made himself, walked into a production meeting just to get a cup of coffee, and the crew tried to kick him out because they literally did not recognize him. All they saw was Ordell, and that's when he knew, yep, I found him.
His commitment to what the audience wants is just incredible. You've got to hear this story about Snakes on a Plane. He signed on because he loved that title. So when the studio later tried to change it to something generic, he actually threatened to quit unless they changed it back. He was like, the title is the entire point.
He also fought tooth and nail for this famous R-rated line. The studio wanted a PG-13 film, but Jackson insisted the situation demanded it. They eventually gave in, they reshot the scene, and an absolute pop culture moment was born. Why? Because he understood what the audience wanted way better than the studio did.
You know, the final cut of a movie we see, that's never the whole story. What we don't see are all the improvised moments that completely define a character, or the shocking scenes that ended up on the cutting room floor. These are the hidden histories of how these icons are really built.
It is just wild to think about how different some of these characters could have been. I mean, in the original Pulp Fiction script, Jules just shoots the robbers in the diner. That whole iconic moment of clarity and redemption, it didn't exist. And his character in The Long Kiss Goodnight was actually supposed to die, but test audiences loved him so much they practically revolted, forcing the studio to shoot a whole new ending just a week before the movie came out. And sometimes, you know, genius just strikes in rehearsal. During Django Unchained, Jackson started mimicking Leonardo DiCaprio's lines just as a joke, but Tarantino saw it, and he loved how it exposed Steven's manipulative nature, so he wrote it into the character right away. A totally playful moment became a key character trait. But here's the thing, it's not always about him fighting for his own ideas. He also talks a lot about the discipline of just trusting a director. Like when he worked with Denzel Washington on The Piano Lesson, he had to completely let go of his own long-held ideas about the character and just submit to a new vision. And that really shows his incredible versatility as a collaborator.
So, after the credits roll, what's left? Well, the most powerful characters, they live on. They live on in our minds, of course. but also in the mind of the actor who brought them to life. And for Jackson, some of these characters, they never truly left.
For instance, when he signed on to play Nick Fury, it wasn't for just one film. It was an unprecedented 9-picture deal. He said he wondered how long he'd have to stay alive to even make 9 movies, not realizing Marvel would pump them out in just a few years. And with that, he became the anchor of an entire cinematic universe.
He also has some pretty fun and honestly compelling arguments for why some of his characters who supposedly died might not be so dead after all. He argues that Jedi can totally survive long falls, and hey, losing a hand is practically a rite of passage for them. And for Jurassic Park, we only ever saw Ray Arnold's arm because a real hurricane destroyed the set before they could film his death scene, so in his mind, Ray could still be out there.
And really, this quote from him just sums it all up, doesn't it? Ultimately, it's about creating something that lasts, something that becomes part of our shared cultural language. It's about building a character so vivid that they aren't just remembered, they truly live on.
So, that kind of leaves us with a really fun question. From Mace Windu to Ray Arnold, these characters feel so real that we can actually sit here and debate their fate. So, if you had the power, whose story would you want to see continue?